Hello, Neogenians. Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today, we are talking about the demonic forces behind sex, religion, and control, and how to be able to integrate these forces so instead of them controlling your life, they are empowering you to live the best life possible. It's going to be really good. Today, we are continuing to explore the Tree of Death and the Qlippothic and how to actualize and transform the forces that reside there. We want to be able to transform those forces that are residing in those aspects of our psyche. So we're going to get started right away. It's going to be really good. But as always, my friends, remember, this is way more than a channel. We are a revolution of consciousness here to make go viral what they tried to bury. So make sure you hit like and subscribe and share to spread this like fire. If you want to help out even more, become a member. You get access to a lot of great stuff like free downloads on Kabbalah and alchemy and rituals. You can also get access to our members only videos. There are a ton of them, and it helps out the channel a lot. You can also check out my books if you haven't already. And if you're looking for a free way to support, all you got to do is follow me on Spotify. I have a Spotify channel. We are growing like fire over there, and we want to reach even more people on that platform. So follow me on Spotify. It's completely free to do. All you got to do is look in the description of this video, and you'll find the link. You'll find a link to everything in the description of this video. Also, you will also find a link in the description of this video to the Path of Shadow tarot cards, the major arcana that I will be using in this video. Okay, that being said, let's get started. As always, I'm going to do a really quick overview and recap of what the heck it is that we're actually even doing here, if this so happens to be your first video. So we are working with the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death. And what this is a model of the psyche. It's a symbolic model of the psyche. So the Tree of Life represents different levels of consciousness. Each of these levels are called Sephirot or Sephirot, and they're connected by paths, which tell you how to reach those different levels. The Tree of Death are the shadow versions of those levels, corrupted versions of those levels, known as Qlippothic. So Sephirot, Qlippothic. And Qlippothic are the twisted versions that you need to transform. And instead of paths, we have paths of shadow or tunnels. They're also known as the tunnels of Set. And this represents lessons and blockages that you need to transform and things to integrate to be able to clear the way to reach higher levels of consciousness, okay? This side is typically associated with angels. This side is typically associated with demons. You want to align yourself with angels, and you want to transform demons. That's what it's about. And remember that this is a symbolic map of the psyche, not an objective, rigorous map of the psyche. It's a symbolic map of the psyche. That's why we talk about things in terms of angels and demons, because your unconscious mind doesn't communicate through language as we understand it. It only communicates through symbolic language, through symbolism. So by speaking the language of symbolism, we're speaking the language of our unconscious, and we can then begin to work with those unconscious energies because we're speaking the same language. All right, so does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Tree of Life, Tree of Death, they're a model of the psyche. A symbolic, metaphorical model of the psyche using symbols so that we can communicate with the psyche, okay? So that being said, let's get started. Today is important, all right? Because last week, so we've gone all the way up the Tree of Death, up to this point here, okay? Up to this point here. Now, this is really important because we're going to be crossing this area here. This area on the Tree of Life is known as the abyss. If you fail to cross it, you will fall into the abyss and end up on the Tree of Death. But here on the Tree of Death, you are already in the abyss. So this here is the River of Lethe. The River of Lethe, also known as the River of Forgetting. Okay? Now, this is important because everything below this has been related to the personal shadow and ego. And above it, we are beginning to attempt to access the transpersonal, the collective unconscious, or the divine realm. And here, all the demons or sentinels guarding this are going to attempt to make you to forget the divine. They will distract you from divinity, make you forget what you are, make you forget your connection to the absolute, or cause you to become highly manipulative. All right? But when you properly integrate them, they give you the power to influence and transform. So that's what's important to understand about the difference between what's above the river and below the river. Below the river is the personal unconscious. Above the river is the collective unconscious. And below the river is where you're doing work on yourself. Above the river, you're still doing work on yourself, but within mind, the power to influence and transform. It's transpersonal. It becomes about transformation, okay? It'll make more sense once we start. So let's get started right away so that we can begin to make sense of what it is that we're actually talking about here. So the first tunnel that we are going to be exploring that crosses the River of Lethe is known as Qlippothic. Qlippothic, which is the shadow of the chariot. Okay? So Qlippothic is the shadow of the chariot, and the particular tunnel that we are exploring is right here. Okay? It connects Qlippothic and Setariel. Qlippothic or Setariel. So Qlippothic is the shadow of Gevura, and Setariel is the shadow of Bina. What essentially that means, this is twisted will, and this is illusion. So we're walking the path of twisted will and illusion. In terms of planetary correspondences, it connects the shadow of Mars, which is Rust Mars, and I don't have my, hold on. I actually am missing one of the coins here. Jupiter, Sun, Neptune. Yes, one moment. I have to go grab something. I didn't have that coin. All right. Better be in here. Let's see. I think it is. Yeah. So the shadow of Mars, which is Rust Mars, to the shadow of Saturn, which is the black cube of Saturn. All right. So we're walking this tunnel here, which is the shadow of this path here. And so what essentially this means, okay? The distorted will of Qlippothic and Mars mixing with the illusions of Setariel and Saturn. So what this combination is willpower, corrupted will, warped by vanity, ego inflation, and fantasy. So Qlippothic is the shadow of the chariot. The chariot is focused will and discipline and purpose, and the self moving in alignment with the higher self and divinity. But in the shadow, that all turns into ego inflation and distraction. So when Qlippothic blocks you, you start believing that the ego is divine. Qlippothic says, you are God. But we are God. But this version of it, not in the sense of your higher self in unity with the absolute, but in the narcissistic sense, okay? So how this shows up is an extreme obsession or focus on image, appearance, clothing, money, sex appeal. There's nothing inherently wrong with these things, but this is when your identity depends on them. And you drain people for attention, and you use seduction to get what you want. That's what happened when Cherasith blocks you. The opposite can also happen, because some people will try to fight Cherasith by suppressing those tendencies, and then that shifts it to the opposite extreme. So those are people who will deny themselves things like beauty and pleasure and attention and money and sexuality, as if rejecting physicality makes them more spiritual. But it doesn't. But that's still Cherasith. That's still forgetting in terms of repression. Now, remember, all of these demons think that they're protecting you. They're not explicitly trying to harm you, even though what they're doing can be harmful. Cherasith thinks she's protecting you. All these distractions make you feel good. They make you feel powerful. But obviously, if our lives are completely overrun by money and vanity and sex and status and all that, you forget your divinity. You have a false sense of divinity in terms of your egoic identity. So what we want to do is integrate Cherasith. Remember what we're doing when we integrate Cherasith is we approach Cherasith as the higher self, and you say, hey, look, I know that you think that you are protecting, but we need to reroute that energy because I have the authority of the higher self. I am the higher self, and I am here to organize everything here. So you're essentially having tuning their instruments, conducting them in the orchestra, or having them join your army, whatever, or become a member of your family, whatever metaphor that you want to use. So when you properly integrate Cherasith, everything changes. And when you do so, you realize that you are divine, but so is everyone else. And it's your higher self that is the divine, not the ego. And you realize that your identity is not your appearance and your worth doesn't come from validation, but pleasure and beauty are not unspiritual. They're part of life. And so when that clicks, you gain the power of Cherasith, and it's extremely powerful. Because what the power of Cherasith is learning glamour magic. That's partly what this is about. If you've never heard of glamour magic before, what glamour magic is intentionally curating your appearance to get a desired outcome. Through the makeup you wear, if you wear makeup, or the clothing that you choose. I was going to say if you wear clothing, but I hope you do. Through the selection of the conscious curation of your appearance to achieve a desired result. That's glamour magic. So when you integrate Cherasith, you are engaging in glamour magic, but not through manipulation, but rather intentional presentation. You understand that appearance and behavior influences others, and you use that strategically, not for manipulative purposes, but for actualizing your will, for creating a better world. So the idea here is that, and I mean, what I mean by that is, if you want to have influence, your appearance matters. And when I say that, I don't mean you have to look perfect. You can look the opposite of that, but it's intentional. That's the difference. Picture someone who just doesn't, who gives no thought to their appearance whatsoever. and they are trying to get some kind of message across, that's fine and it can work. But what works even more effectively if appearance is taken into account. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to look good. You could do the opposite. You could dress in rags, but that would be to get a point across. If you were to do that, the point would be, look, I don't focus on my words, don't focus on my looks. That would be, for example, a point of that. So hopefully you understand what I mean. The idea here is understanding how appearance and behavior influences and using that to your advantage strategically. And that can manifest in many different ways. And this also applies to money. So instead of chasing money to feel superior, or because it's wrapped up in your identity, you use it like a tool to manifest your goals, support your purpose, and shape reality. Money becomes a means to an end rather than an end to itself. Sexuality can shift as well. You can use that libido, that energy, and that confidence in terms of better transforming the world as well. The key thing to understand is that these things are not bad. You just learn not to identify with them. You don't want to confuse the tools for identity. Your ego becomes a tool. Your appearance becomes a tool. Your charm becomes a tool. Your sexuality becomes a tool. Your resources become tools. Not who you are, but things that you can use. Are your clothing who you are? No. But you can select your clothing to transmit a particular message. For example, the color black is usually used as a symbol of the anti-establishment or going against orthodoxy. That's one reason for, let's say, dressing in black. Dressing in black can also be symbolic for containing light, because black absorbs all light of the visible light spectrum. So, like a black hole is filled with light. So I'm just using myself as an example of like why I'm intentional about the color choice that I use, etc. So it can manifest in any way that you so will, but you need to be conscious of that fact. And you can look at someone like Diogenes. Diogenes was a philosopher who just like dressed in rags, and he lived in a cave or something, and he only owned a bucket or something like that. But he was this was very intentional to be like, hey, I don't need to dress nice for you to have something purposeful to say. Anyway, the point is that you use the material world consciously instead of getting lost in it, instead of it making it forget what you are. Because the whole point here is using these powers to influence the world and shape the world. Just don't mistake the tools that you use to do that as your true self. You can wear many different masks, but don't identify with the mask. Be strategic about life is a play. The word persona comes from mask. People adopt different personas, but don't identify with the persona. Learn how to use it. Learn how to use glamour, but don't worship. Understand how to influence others, but don't manipulate them. Being influential is a good thing if you are attempting to create a better world. Now, if you're just doing it for manipulation, then that's where that energy is destructive on you and the world. So when you do this, Cherith stops being a sentinel that distracts you or corrupts you, and you can use the power of Cherith to help you shape reality. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. let's talk about some practical exercises for integration. These exercises I'm going to give you are examples of integrative techniques. It's just to get the ball rolling. You can think of any technique that would be helpful for yourself. These are just ideas. So let me bring up my notes here. Okay, so one exercise that you can do is whenever you choose your clothing, post online, flirt with someone, or buy something, or think about your appearance. Whenever you do those things, stop and ask yourself, are you doing this because it expresses you or for a conscious particular purpose? Or are you doing it because you want validation? You just want your ego stroked. No judgment, just honesty. That's the important thing too. When you approach these demons, don't judge them. Just try to understand them. So don't judge yourself. Just begin to understand what motivates your choices. Let's see here. You can begin to understand how to use glamour as intention rather than your identity. So think about something where your appearance could help you reach a goal. Like if you're having an interview or a date or filming a video or whatever. Instead of just dressing for validation, or instead of not giving a shit at all and not even thinking about it, do it consciously for impact. Ask yourself what it is that you want to communicate. And remember, again, this can manifest in many different ways. You can consciously choose to dress down, to dress in rags if you wanted to. That's totally fine. Or you could do the opposite. You could dress in a very curated way, in a way that's very glamorous. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are conscious of your intention behind why you're doing it and how it will affect the goal that you're trying to achieve. So you may have an interview and you might realize, oh, hey, dressing a certain way will help me get this interview. Alternatively, you might realize, hey, you know what? I don't want to dress a certain way because I want to be hired for my skills, not because of my level of attractiveness or something like that. But the difference is that you are doing it with intention and consciously instead of for validation or not thinking about it at all. Reframe money as a tool. Write down 3 things that money can help you accomplish that don't have anything to do with ego, that can improve your life or the lives of others. So for example, upgrade your equipment so you can reach more people. Invest in education or training. Or support a cause that you care about, whatever. Then write down, money is not who I am, money is what I use. And this breaks the illusion that wealth is your identity. Because that's a huge problem in this world today. People are just numbers and associate their monetary success with who they are. You want to get away from that. But it's also not about, just living in a cave unless you really want to. You don't have to give things up. It's just about being intentional and conscious and not identifying with. Here's another one. So sometimes Cherasith, we talked about, shows up in the opposite way, where you're like, oh, I don't care about money. I don't care about looks. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. I'm above all that. I'm much too spiritual for that. I'm going to abstain from all those things. Now, if you truly want to do that, that's perfectly fine. But again, think about, why are you doing this? You don't have to do that to be spiritual. If that's how you want to explore your spirituality, that's fine, that's your choice, but it's not necessary to do that. You don't have to give those things up to be spiritual. And also think about, is this genuine, or are you doing it to try to look spiritual? And that's the ego sneaking in through the back door. And so you can help dissolve that spiritual superiority mask. So I really want to emphasize here, remember, all of this, and I'm saying it again and again, but I think it can be easily misunderstood, so that's why I'm emphasizing it here, is that this is about being conscious and intentional, not saying you have to go one way or another. So when it comes to spirituality, you don't have to give up things of the material world to be spiritual. But you can, if you want to, just be conscious about it and intentional about it and understand your motivation behind it. Like, for example, if I were to become an ascetic and give up everything in the material world, I wouldn't have a YouTube channel. I wouldn't be able to reach people with my videos. And to me, that's important. And for me, that is part of my spirituality. All of these, the microphone, the camera, the monitors, these are all magical tools, magical weapons, instruments of magic to transmit a spell, the message, an incantation, whatever, the philosophy, the message. All of this is about spreading a message so that more people can be free to create themselves, and so we can fucking enjoy life. I know, wild idea, right? Crazy idea. But so we can actually have a nice world and enjoy it. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. This is a good one. So study the psychology of presentation. So next time you're scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, whatever, all the short, the short form videos, pause on the videos that go viral and especially think about the ones that go viral for the presentation. Because think about it, there are some videos out there that have amazing content, but horrible presentation. And so it gets like 20 views. And on the flip side, there might be videos that are very aesthetically pleasing, like, let's say an anime waifu bouncing around that's going to get like 30 million views or something, but there's no content there. So just notice that. Notice the lighting, the camera, the way the person presents themselves, the way they look into the lens, the energy they project, whatever. And this is about just understanding how appearance, presence, and presentation influences attention. This is glamour magic. That's what glamour magic is. Just through the vehicle of social media. These people are using glamour magic without knowing it. They're intentional. Some of them are intentional with what they're doing, but they don't associate with magic. But you get what I mean. So this is just about observing it, noticing what draws you in and why. And it'll just start getting you to understand that and get you thinking how you can consciously and ethically do that to amplify your message. Again, it can be in any way. Dressing really nice or dressing in rags or whatever. Just the difference is it's just that you're being very intentional and conscious about it and understanding how these forces work, because they're very powerful forces. And why are we even talking about this? Because we're crossing the River of Lethe, and this is the transpersonal domain, which means the domain of influencing the world. And so you need to think about these things in terms of influencing the world. If you don't integrate these systems, you're either going to be manipulative or it's going to just cause you to forget everything. You're going to be so absorbed with vanity and greed and seduction and all that. So that was Cherasith, the shadow of the chariot. Let's move on to the next tunnel. All right, so the next tunnel that we are talking about is tunnel 17, Zamradiel. Zamradiel which is the shadow of the lovers. Zamradiel is the tunnel or path between Tigerian and Sateriel. Thagirian and Sateriel. So it's this path right here between Thagirian and Sateriel. Thagirian is the shadow of Tiferet. And we saw already that same thing, Sateriel is the shadow of Binah. So, in terms of planetary correspondences, we already saw that it's the shadow of Saturn, which is the black cube of Saturn, dealing with illusion. And then we have in Tigerian the shadow of the sun, which is the black sun, which is corrupted ego. So, psychologically, this path here pulls you between two extremes. Tigerian, the shadow of the sun, the black sun, represents distorted identity, ego rigidity, and the thought of like, this is who I am in terms of egoic identity. And then Sateriel, we saw, represents the black cube of Saturn, which is suffocating rigid categories and the demand that reality has to fit inside a neat little metaphysical box. In terms of, and also remember, Sateriel also represents illusion. So rigid boundaries and illusion, which means those rigid boundaries can be illusory, tied to egoic identification. So, Zamradiel is the sentinel on this path, which is the shadow of the lovers. Now, the lovers isn't actually about literal romance. It's about metaphysical union. And so the shadow of the lovers, which is Zamradiel, is what happens when you divide reality into false, illusory boundaries. So Zamradiel rules the psychological impulse to cut reality into two piles and pretend they're absolute opposites, which can be in terms of gender, but not just gender, everything. Spirit versus matter, masculine versus feminine, logic versus emotion, higher versus lower. This tunnel is all about how splitting things into illusory boxes, black cube of Saturn, becomes a prison. And this is really dominating the world right now. We see this distorted Zamradiel energy all over, literally dividing the nation. So when Zamradiel blocks you, your consciousness gets stuck in either or thinking. So this is where people start clinging to a rigid identity, corrupted identity, or worldview, because it makes them feel safe based on illusory boundaries. So specifically, how can this manifest? One example that we can see all over the world today is over-identifying with a gender role and policing anyone who doesn't match it. Now, what I mean by that is, by over-identifying with a gender role, what I mean by that is, if you want to present as masculine or feminine or non-binary, that's fine. But the point is not identifying with that. So what I mean is you can present yourself in a very, let's say, masculine way. I'm not saying in Zamradiel you have to start presenting yourself feminine. That's what I'm saying. But you realize that the gender role that you have chosen is like a clothing choice. You are a soul. You are a system of light. You are a mathematical energy. Mathematical energy does not fit into a false gender binary or a sexual identification. So that's Zamradiel energy can manifest as over-identifying with a gender role and policing anyone who doesn't match it. And thinking that anyone outside your experience is wrong, unnatural, or delusional, or have mental problems. Getting obsessed with what bathroom to use, that's Zamradiel. All over that. Hating trans people, non-binary people, or anyone who doesn't fit traditional gender roles and categories. It can also manifest very toxically in spiritual communities by treating the masculine and feminine as cosmic absolutes instead of symbolic energies. So masculine and feminine is not literally about gender in the way that we understand it and define it today in terms of gender roles. Masculine and feminine just represents poles of energy. So we can talk about feminine as being, for example, loving and kind and emotional. And we talk about the masculine as being rigid and logical and severe. But guess what? In Kabbalah, it's the opposite. The masculine is typically what's associated with the giving and the merciful and the loving, while the feminine is associated with logic, reason, and rigidity, because they see the feminine as the womb that structures. The seed gives, the womb receives, and structures. But it's not literally about cum or a womb. All right? We're not talking literally about sperm and a womb. These are metaphors, symbols. You can just talk about in terms of negative and positive energy. But we see this show up very toxically in a lot of spiritual communities that talk endlessly about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, but in a negative way. Like, oh, well, you have the divine masculine and feminine both live within us, but we have all those energies within us. And guess what? They completely forget that androgyny exists. Like in Gnosticism, you have the syzygies that come in male-female pairs, but the point is, when they are whole, they are androgynous. They are just expressed in a particular modality. So it doesn't. But Zamradiel isn't necessarily just about gender. It can also be the belief that spirit is pure and matter is evil. Or the opposite. Matter is the only reality and all the spiritual stuff is all fake. Whatever it is, Zamradiel is the same distortion. Splitting reality into illusory, exaggerated poles and forcing yourself or others inside one of them. which can feel like shame if you don't feel like you fit into the right role, or disgust towards parts of yourself that you repress. It can cause one to definitely project that discomfort onto others. They're weird, they're problems, they're a threat, they have a mental illness. But remember, Zamradiel thinks it's protecting you. Zamradiel is not evil. It's how it thinks it's protecting you is because it basically thinks, well, if you don't pick a role, you don't know who you are. If you don't have these categories, everything collapses, everything is chaos. Which is not true. And Zamradiel also knows that if you accept the fluidity in yourself, that you can be mocked or rejected by others, which is why Zamradiel puts those demarcations there, to try and protect you by simplifying reality in illusory, rigid boxes. It says rigid roles is safe. Having more expansive, fluid understanding of reality is dangerous. That's what Zamradiel thinks. But instead of protecting you, it imprisons you. Okay, so let's talk about integrating Zamradiel. So when you integrate Zamradiel, here's what happens. You stop confusing expression and presentation with your being. And what I mean by that is you realize that you can express yourself as masculine, but realize that your true self as an eternal soul isn't male or female. So it's about stop confusing expression with essence. And think about the true meaning of the word hermaphrodite, okay? The word hermaphrodite comes from the combination of Hermes and Aphrodite. Hermaphrodite, Hermes, Aphrodite. Hermes represents mind and logic and communication. Aphrodite represents love, beauty, embodiment. And that's the integration there. So when you integrate Zamradiel, you realize that your gender expression is a chosen role, not your essence. Masculine, feminine, and androgynous energies are symbols. And then going beyond just the gender symbolism, you realize that spirit and matter aren't enemies. They're two sides of the same coin. And so you understand that you're mathematical light wearing a costume. And you begin to have the spirit, you have spirit and matter marry, the marriage of spirit and matter. You can live as a spiritual being in a material world without feeling like matter is evil or shameful. Matter, you realize that matter is an expression of the spiritual. Matter is the clothing that spirit wears. So remember, this is about intentionality. This allows you to use gender and opposing archetypal energies, not even in terms of gender, just all the opposing forces, intentionally, like tools, without confusing them for who you are. So basically you stop realizing, oh, I don't have to choose a side. You are both and neither. What you can choose is how to express yourself. Like you wake up in the morning, you go to your closet, you pick out what clothes you're going to wear. You could choose a lifetime of a particular presentation, but you realize that it's not the truth about who you are, and you don't have to force others into rigid, illusory categories. So let's talk about, and by the way, this topic is probably going to piss a lot of people off, but that's what happens when you begin to expose a repressed aspect. And that aspect is incredibly repressed today. We can see that everywhere. Oh my God, it's all over the place. That shadow, it's all over every community, even the spiritual community. All right, so let's talk about some integration exercises. Let me get my notes here. Okay, so here's one to begin to see presentation as like a costume, or a presentation as a presentation rather than an identity. Take one part of yourself, right? Whether that's a gender or a personality trait or an aesthetic, and ask yourself, where did this come from? Did I genuinely choose this? Or am I doing it because this is how culture says I should be, or society says I should be, or my parents say I should be, or my religion says that I should be? Am I consciously choosing to express, present in a certain way because that's truly in alignment with how I want to express, or is it because that role has been defined for you by a system ruled by Zamradiel? And begin to see those different traits as clothing or accessories that you can take on or off. And if it's your choice that you want to wear that particular presentation your entire life, that's totally fine. But just like the last tunnel as well, the difference is just that you're consciously choosing. You're consciously aware, and you're not hindering others. Because remember, we're really getting into the transpersonal domain, and so Zamradiel is that force that divides across the world. So we want to heal that division in us so that we can begin to heal that division in the world. Here's an exercise for spirit and matter. Write 2 lists. On one list, what you consider spiritual, and on the other list, write things that you consider material. And then ask yourself, how can I merge them in a healthy way? Think about ways where you can merge the spiritual and the material in a healthy way. There are plenty of different ways you can do that. Whether it's money or sex or food versus something that you might consider spiritual, like knowledge, studying, altered states of consciousness. Now, I'm not saying you have to merge them all the time. Sometimes you want to do one or the other. But think about how you can do that. Could you perhaps express your spirituality through sex? Could you use your money to spread a message? So those are examples of like combining spiritual and material. And you're seeing how these paths relate as well, right? Like we're using a lot of some of the previous Cherasith energy is coming along here. But the point is to be just conscious and intentional about it. And like I said, I'm not saying that you always have to do both, but just as an exercise, think about how one could do both, combine. It's just an exercise to get you to understand that matter is an expression of spirit. Here's a really important one for projection. When you feel judgment towards someone, like maybe a guy who wears makeup, or a woman that hasn't shaved her legs or something. Really, when you feel that, stop and ask yourself, why do you feel like this is so threatening to you? And why is it triggering an aspect of me? And this will help you to spot the false categories, the arbitrary categories. Now, that's not to say that like all men have to start wearing makeup and women shouldn't shave their legs. No, it's just people can do whatever the fuck they want because it's arbitrary. Just like blue is for boys and pink is for girls. That wasn't always the case. It used to be the opposite. It was only recently that changed. I forget what the date was exactly, but it wasn't too long ago that it was the opposite. That pink was for boys and blue was for girls, because pink showed like was like a strong emotional color, like kind of like red, like a passionate color, and then blue was like a soothing, relaxing, watery color. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is that this is all a game, a play, a story, a costume, a presentation. And so live your life the way you want and let other people live the way they want. And play the game the way they want to play it. And express themselves the way they want to express themselves. So when you feel that triggering, catch yourself and realize that it's exposing an illusory boundary, black cube, created by Zamradiel. Okay. Man, this video is going to piss so many people off. Excellent. Excellent. This is a big one right now. This world is really, really divided because of it, which is exactly the whole what Zamradiel does. So let's talk about the next tunnel here. Let's see. Okay. So that was Zamradiel, Shadow of the Lovers. Now we move into tunnel 16, which is Uriens. Uriens, which is the shadow of the Hierophant. The shadow of the Hierophant. So this path goes from Gahag Shekla to Gehogiel. Gahag Shekla is the shadow of Chesed. And, oops, this is Chesed. Gahag Shekla is the shadow of Chesed. Gehogiel is the shadow of Chochmah. So, what does this mean psychologically? Is that it is the shadow of, well, here, let's get into the planetary associations first. So the planetary association is the shadow of Jupiter, which is red storm Jupiter, and the shadow of Neptune, the shadow of Neptune, which is Dionysian madness. Okay? Dionysian madness. So, here we have the need for order, tradition, and authority. And combined with the chaos of Gehogiel and the shadow of Neptune, Dionysian madness. So what we're talking about here is how the power of Uriens through authoritative systems like religion, causes the world to go mad. All right? Authoritative systems. Jupiter is the king of the gods. Zeus. Yahweh. Toxic religious authority that makes the world go mad, dividing the world with the cross. So this is the shadow of the Hierophant. The Hierophant represents the part of the psyche that clings to tradition, authority, and external guidance. And that's not necessarily always bad. It's fine to have a teacher and have external authority, but it can get real bad, can't it? Because when it goes bad, it gets real dark, and it can become, the Urians can result in fanatical belief, or the opposite, the rejection of all systems. So when Urians blocks you, your relationship with authority becomes twisted. And it can go in two opposite directions. On one hand, it can result in either you feeling like a desperate need for someone else to lead you, a savior, a chosen one, some figure that will fix everything, which could be a religious leader, a political figure, a spiritual guru, or the aliens are coming next month to take the chosen ones. This is where you're looking for a savior, and you're attached to traditions and dogma and external authority because it feels much safer than having to think for yourself. But the shadow can swing the opposite direction as well, okay? It can swing the opposite direction. Well, where Urians can create the person who rebels against everything automatically. Just like, oh, if it has a structure, you reject it. If it's spiritual, you mock it. If it's a rule, you break it. And so that in itself becomes a trap. That's egoic identification with yourself as the rule breaker. Sometimes rules are good. Sometimes rules are bad. Sometimes rules are good. Sometimes systems are bad. Sometimes systems are good. Sometimes parts of systems are good and parts of systems are bad. Either way, totally just giving all your trust into an external figure or system, not a good idea. The opposite direction as well, just denying everything for the sake of denying it, is also harmful. Some people are good at what they do. If you're going to have surgery, you probably want to go to a surgeon and have trust that the surgeon knows what they're doing. That's just an example, not more of like an analogy. So Urians distorts your sense of meaning, okay? Either someone else has to define it for you, or you destroy every definition. Now, of course, remember, Urians thinks it's protecting you. In one case, either trying to keep you stable, because it can feel very safe to be attached to a rigid religion. Just, do what the Bible says. Or a certain political party, just do what the party says. Being free is hard. Being free comes with anxiety. You have to make choices and be responsible for your choices, rather than just going, well, I'm just going to do exactly what God says and I don't even have to think about it. Tries to give you something solid to cling to. Now, for the opposite, Urians basically says, if you trust anything, you'll be controlled, so destroy it first. And this will often happen for someone who leaves a religion. I feel like did I ever go through that? Because I stepped away from, I'm an ex-Christian. I stepped away from Christianity. I wouldn't say that, but I could see myself doing that, right? I could see myself swinging the opposite direction where just like, oh, anything spiritual is just automatically false. I could see myself having gone that direction, but I didn't. But I know a lot of people do, and that's a reaction to, often a reaction to leaving religion, which sometimes can be a healthy step, but as long as you keep moving from that and overcome that, and not get stuck in that. Oh, but okay. Anyway, and either way, there's two extremes, but they're both meant to protect you in one way or another, either to protect you from control or to protect you from the anxiety of freedom. So when you integrate Urians, this whole energy transforms. You stop looking for a savior and needing a guru or a chosen one or a prophecy or an alien or a political messiah, and you realize that you are your savior. You are the one who chooses. So, but it's also not about rejecting everything. Urians gives you the ability to draw from tradition without being trapped by it. So you can look at a religion or look at a system and discern which beliefs are toxic and dismantle them. And you can see the ones that are meaningful and keep them. This is what we do. You see this all the time with when we study Gnosticism. When we study Gnosticism, we go, oh, look, this is a great symbolic interpretation. This is a great symbolic interpretation. This is great. This is great. Oh, wait, they didn't get, this part isn't though, particularly seeing the material world as evil. If we were just like traditionalist Gnostics, let's say, then we would just be like, oh, well, Gnosticism says the material world is evil, so I'm just going to believe it's evil. Rather, we can look at these systems, and not just Gnosticism, but any system. Gnosticism, Kabbalah, Hinduism, magic, and see what aspects are meaningful and empowering and healthy, and which are toxic and should be discarded. So this is where you get your internal authority. Urians gives you confidence. You become the one who interprets meaning. And you become the second coming. You are the second coming of Christ. We are the second coming of Christ. In the sense of awakening to your own self-mastery. And so this results in a very grounded sense of confidence. And the ability to use structure when it helps and discard it when it harms. It allows you to see spirituality as symbolic rather than literal. And understand that you're responsible for your growth. When you integrate Urians, you can pull from philosophy, religion, mysticism, science, without enslaving yourself to any one of them. All of those systems are incomplete in one way or another. So Urians allows you to become free to create yourself. Let's talk about some integration exercises for Urians. Oh, there's a lot of good ones here. Yeah. This is a pretty important step. So let's talk about this. Look in a mirror and say out loud, no one is coming to save me. I am the one who decides what becomes of my life. And notice the emotions that show up. It will probably be a mix if you've never done something like this. Maybe fear and empowerment. Maybe feeling shame, like you're sinning, but also feeling free. and examine why you feel the way that you do. And realize that the shame is an illusion built from toxic religious systems or spiritual systems that want to minimize you. And that fear is okay, because with freedom comes anxiety. It's just about cultivating courage. Courage doesn't mean that you don't have fear. Courage means that you're able to face what you fear. So cultivate that courage. If someone had the ability, I'm watching Welcome to Derry right now, which is the It series on TV, and one of the characters has some condition where he can't feel fear. One of the main characters just cannot feel fear, has the inability to feel fear. So if someone has the inability to feel fear and they jump off a plane, is it because they have courage? No, the person who has courage is the one who does feel fear but faces it anyway. So when you are free to create yourself, you will have fear, but you will have the potential to be courageous. Okay, so here's one to break down systems. Whenever you catch yourself feeling absolutely certain about something, like a religion, whether it's like religious or political or metaphysical or whatever, just pause and ask yourself, what if the opposite were true? Now, you don't have to believe that the opposite is actually true. Just imagine it. Just imagine that it was. And this can begin to break dogmatic thinking and reopen your intuitive intelligence. Because it doesn't mean that the opposite is true. It just means that if you have a certain belief that you've never examined before and believe it certainly, but then think about, well, what if the opposite were true? Maybe it's not. But if it is, that may open your mind and get you thinking of a new perspective. Here's another one. So when it comes to someone like who rebels against everything, pick a tradition that you reject or a religion that you reject, whatever. And instead of rejecting it automatically, spend a few minutes interpreting it symbolically to see if it could hold deeper insight. Or on the flip side, well, hold on. Let me clarify that for a minute. So let's take the crucifixion of Jesus, for example. Let's say you left Christianity and you're like, I reject Christianity. I reject the crucifixion of Jesus. It's all stupid. It's based on sacrifice. You ever think about that? Christianity is based on child sacrifice. God killed his son, sacrificed his son. Christianity is literally based on child sacrifice. It's crazy when you think about it. Anyway, taken literally, yeah, that's sick. But you can do what the Valentinians did and interpret it symbolically as like the same symbolism as the phoenix, the death of the old self so the new self can rise. Being burned in the fire and being reborn in the ashes, from the ashes. So when you interpret it symbolically, it can have a very healthy meaning. Same thing, instead of something you reject, on the flip side, think of something that you believe literally. Heaven, astrology, karma, whatever. And reinterpret it symbolically. think about, well, what if this is symbolic? And what could it mean symbolically? Start to look at the deeper meaning. Basically, begin to look at the symbolic, deeper meanings behind things rather than just believing them literally or just rejecting them outright. Here's a good one for especially if someone's leaving religion. Write down some religious rules or doctrines or absolute truths that controlled you, and then write a single sentence that completely contradicts it, even if it's blasphemous. This is so that you can break these rigid mental programs so that your mind can start to breathe again. I would do something sort of similar to this when I was leaving Christianity. I would force myself to curse, like, say bad words like fuck or whatever. Because I used to feel super guilty about it because I thought that was a sin. So I would make myself curse. Not like just randomly in public, but, when it was appropriate to do so. And at first I felt a ton of shame and sin and guilt. But after you do it for a while, it starts to lose its hold on you because you realize that it's an illusion. It's just a word. Now, of course, words have meaning, and you should be careful with your words. But you're not going to go to hell because you say fuck or something like that. Anyway, it's sort of similar to that. Oh, here's another one. Break the prophecy. So if you've ever clung to some kind of prophecy, like the second coming or the rapture or divine judgment or the Messiah or aliens or whatever, rewrite the prophecy where it's fulfilled because you act, not because some external figure intervenes. This is really powerful. You're like creating your own prophecy here, your own mythos, where you are the one who fulfills. You are the Messiah. You are the second coming, where you fulfill. Now, this isn't ego inflation, right? Be careful that it doesn't become that. But it's about realizing that you are the hand of God. All of us are. We all are. We are God. And so there's no savior coming to save us. We are the fulfillment of the prophecies. We are the Messiah. We are the second coming. We are the aliens. And this is a really powerful one. So try that out. Putting it, because you're doing it in symbolic. Prophecy is very, very powerful symbolically. So rewriting a prophecy where your actions help to, let's say, create a better world. That can be very, very powerful psychologically. So here's another one. Take any. There's a lot for this one, but it's pretty important. Take away any or take any religious command that controlled you, like maybe 10 Commandments or purity rules. I used to have a purity ring. Obedience, whatever. Write down certain commands that controlled you, and then next to them, reinterpret them so that they are empowering. So if you wrote down obey, write discern. If you wrote submit, write choose. If you wrote wait for salvation, write become the salvation. Whatever it is, you are crossing out the toxic patterns that controlled you and rewriting your own commandments. Of course, don't let those control you either, but you have to, don't set them in stone, like literally, but you get the idea. You are writing your own commandments here. So this is basically what you're doing with Urians. You're like creating kind of like your own religion in a certain way. You're writing your prophecy, you're writing your commandments. And this is really powerful because it's in terms of powerful symbolism, and it helps you reprogram your unconscious blueprint, how your psyche is set up, so that you can have the power to be in control of your life, to free yourself, become free to create yourself. All right. So that was Urian's Shadow of the Hierophant. And let's just take a look and see what we, let's see, we took a look at Cherasith, Shadow of the Chariot, Zamradiel, Shadow of the Lovers, and Urien's Shadow of the Hierophant. And you probably noticed that a lot of these cards and energies kind of played off of each other because they are related in a lot of ways. Next week, we will continue to explore the tunnels and paths above the River of Forgetting, but these are the three that we are looking at today, that we looked at today. As always, in the comments, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, if you have any topics that you want more detail about, more nuances explored, let me know. Tell me in the comments. But I hope you enjoyed this, my friends. As always, remember, we are way more than a channel. We are a revolution of consciousness here to wake the world the fuck up. So hit like, share, subscribe. Spread this like fire. If you want to help out even more, become a member. You'll get access to a lot of great free downloads on Kabbalah and alchemy and rituals. You can also check out my books. And for a free way to support, follow me on Spotify. We are growing really fast over there and reaching a whole new audience. So if you have a Spotify account, please go follow me. Helps out a lot. Links to all of those things, my Spotify channel, the books, the cards as well, if you want to, get some of these. All of those are in the description of this video. So thank you so much, my friends. Big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Dallas, Nusalina, Chris Magistus, Eric, Zombie Ninja, Happy Ninja, Sandy, Soul, Tornado, Sarah, Son of God, Solange, and everyone else. And if your name isn't up here yet, I need to update this list. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And Ad Astra.